Good afternoon to everyone. I hope we're okay and we're ready for the upcoming exams. For the GCEs, your exams will begin on the 29th of July. Then the internal candidates, your exams will begin on the 1st of November. So I hope we're all ready. We're studying in preparation for the same exams. As requested by some of you students that we should do a video on some questions from a 2018 biology past paper, that is paper 2, and that is question 1 and question 4. So those two questions will be our main focus in today's video. Okay, without further ado, let's drive into the question and see how we're supposed to deal with such a question if perhaps it came in an exam. So the first question is talking about cells, and you specifically know that cells, any biology paper should have cells, and in most cases it is just the first question as you open your second biology paper. In most cases it is the first question. Quite all right, you will find some question on cells in paper 1, but not as compared to questions which are found in paper 2. At least they have a lot of marks. In paper 1 you'll find that a question on cells will just have maybe just a mark, if not 2. But in paper 2, questions on cells, they can even go up to 8 marks. Okay, so we really need to understand cells. It is just a grade 10 lesson. Okay, so let's look at this question. So the question reads, figure 1.1 and 1.2 shows specialized cells E and F. As have been teaching, or as have been always saying, it is very important to understand the question first before we even attempt. So they're saying specialized cells, so which means these two cells, there's cell E and cell F, they're specialized. Now what do they mean when they say specialized? From the word specific, that is where this word is coming from. So these cells have a specific function. No wonder we're saying the specialized cells. Okay, a cell will undergo 3 stages. The first one, we call it cell division. So cell division, this is just a stage at which cells actively divide. That is cell division. Then the second stage is cell elongation. Cell elongation, this is a stage where cells absorb a lot of water in their vacuole and increase in size. Then finally, the third stage is cell specialization. Okay, so cell specialization, this is a stage at which cells develop their features to carry out a specific function. So since I'm saying these are specialized cells, which means they only have one specific function. Okay, so before we even look at the questions, mind you, just after these two cells which have been shown, we have some questions there. Like the first question, question A number 1, is saying identify the cell labeled F. Okay, but I disregard the concept of rushing to the questions. Okay, the first thing we're supposed to do is try to understand something from these two diagrams we're having, which is figure 1.1 and 1.2. After we analyze these two diagrams, you'll find that by so doing, we'll have even answered all the questions that are beneath. Okay, so like the first cell, cell A, cell E. This cell, looking at its physical appearance, the way I can see it, it has the nucleus there, and there's this part which is labeled G. So this cell should be an animal, a plant cell. Okay, reason being it has cilia. Okay, take note. Okay, so if we say that there are two types of cells, which is plant and animal cells, but specifically looking at this one, okay, since it is having the cilia, it should be an animal cell. Take note, it should be an animal cell because it has the cilia here. I'll explain that in a bit. It is an animal cell. Then cell F, this cell also is an animal cell. Okay, is an animal cell, and there should always be a reason why I'm saying this is an animal cell and the other one is also an animal cell. So here we're just having animal cells, we don't have plant cells there. Okay, yeah, and if we look at this first cell, which is cell E, it is having the nucleus there. Same applies to cell F, it is also having the nucleus, and it is having this outer layer. Okay, this outer layer is known as the cell membrane. Okay, why is it said to be the cell membrane? Or in other books you find that they say it is a selectively permeable membrane. They say it is a selectively permeable membrane because it selects what goes in and out of the cell. It is selectively. Okay, then permeable means it is allowing substances to go in and out. So no wonder we also call it a selectively permeable membrane. That's the only function it has. Okay, that is the first layer you see if we're dealing with an animal cell. But if we're dealing with a plant cell, you always see the cell wall. Okay, so now let's look at the questions and see what we can do. So the first question is saying identify the cell labeled F in figure 1.2. So this cell F, it was so wrong. At many times I've given this question to students and they get it wrong. Not specifically that they don't know, but there's just one reason why they get it wrong. Okay, so this cell, if also you're thinking that this, if since I've said identify the cell F, if you say white blood cell, I would definitely mark you wrong. Okay, I would definitely mark you wrong. Not the fact that it is not a blood cell. Yes, it is a blood cell, specifically a white blood cell. Now, if you remember in the first lesson, I said there are two types of white blood cells. Okay, so if you just say it is a white blood cell, which one are you referring to? Because just looking at its structure, the structure can give you which type of a white blood cell it is amongst or between those two types. Okay, so looking at this one, if you look at the nucleus is lobed. Okay, the only difference between the two types of white blood cells, if you don't know the two types of white blood cells, we have the phagocytes and the lymphocytes. Okay, just from the word, because white blood cells are also called leukocytes. Okay, they're called leukocytes. That's the other name of white blood cells. Then red blood cells are called erythrocytes. Okay, so white blood cells, they are called leukocytes, and their main function is to fight against infections. The example that I always love to give is, how sure are you that yesterday night you were not bitten by an anopheles mosquito? How sure are you? Okay, since we are not sure, and right now we are not having any symptoms of malaria, because if you are bitten by an anopheles mosquito, a female mosquito, you should have malaria. But why is it that we are not? It's because these white blood cells which are present in our bodies, they had to fight against that infection. Okay, now how do they fight against a certain infection? They fight against infections in two ways. No wonder there are two types of white blood cells. So for phagocytes, okay, phagocytes, they fight against infections through a process we call phagocytosis. Okay, just from the name a phagocyte. So that is why we draw the actual name or the process of fighting against infection, which is phagocytosis. Okay, so to define that, phagocytosis is a process by which a phagocyte takes in foreign materials and digests them. Okay, a phagocyte takes in foreign materials and digests them. So as that foreign material is being digested, it becomes inactive. Okay, no wonder if you're bitten by a female mosquito, it is a plasmodium of malaria. We know that. Okay, so if those blood cells, or white blood cells to be specific, are present in your body, they will engulf. Okay, to engulf means to enclose. Okay, they will engulf that foreign material and digest it. By so doing, it becomes very weak. No wonder up to now, even though maybe perhaps you were bitten by a female mosquito, but right now you're not having any malaria. That is the reason why. Okay, so it fights against infections by engulfing. To engulf means to enclose and digest. Okay, and that process is known as phagocytosis. Okay, then the other type of a white blood cell we have is a lymphocyte. Okay, so these lymphocytes, they fight also against infections, simply because it is a white blood cell also, so it should fight against infections, but in a different way as a phagocyte does. Okay, so now how does a lymphocyte fight against infections? It fights against infections by producing what we call antibodies and antitoxins. Okay, so antibodies, these are just plasma proteins that destroy foreign materials. Antibodies are simply plasma proteins that destroy foreign materials. Then these same lymphocytes, they also produce what we call the antitoxins. Okay, so antitoxins, these are plasma proteins that neutralize the poison from foreign materials. Okay, like an example I can give on that, we say that people with blood group O, they're kind of immune to some certain sicknesses. No, they're not. We can, okay, yeah, they're immune in some way, but in a biological perspective, they don't really get sick easily because blood group O has antibodies, not antigens. It has no antigens, it has only antibodies. And looking at the definition, I've said antibodies, these are plasma proteins that destroy foreign materials. No wonder you see those people with blood group O, like people with blood group O, they don't get sick easily or frequently. Just if they're exposed to some foreign materials, then they'll get sick. No, because they have a lot of antibodies in their bloodstreams, and those antibodies will try to destroy those foreign materials. So we have seen how these two blood cells fight against infections. Okay, we've talked of a phagocyte, which is trying to fight against infections through the process of phagocytosis or engulfing. It will engulf and digest. Then lymphocytes are fighting against infections by producing antibodies and antitoxins. So these two cells, they differ in structure. Okay, these two cells, they differ in structure. Like the cell we're having there, yes, it is a white blood cell, but specifically that is a phagocyte. Okay, why am I saying so? Because a phagocyte has a lobed nucleus. Like if you can see the structure of this nucleus, it is lobed. The way it appears, it is lobed. The lobedness of this nucleus makes engulfing very easy, to enclose foreign materials very easily. Okay, so this type of a cell F, this is a phagocyte. Then in brackets, if you want, that's when you can say white blood cell. Yes, it is a white blood cell. But if you directly say that is a white blood cell, you'll be wrongly marked, because you're not being specific. Yes, it is a white blood cell, but which one of the two is that cell? Okay, then if you want to know that, okay, this is a lymphocyte has a large nucleus. It is large. I think in the next lesson I'll explain the appearance. It has a large nucleus, not compared to this one. The nucleus reaches even up to here. It comes like that. Okay, so that is the major difference. Okay, it is not like of red blood cells. Okay, one common thing I love about red blood cells is that they don't have the nucleus. Okay, for white blood cell, we're getting the difference between these two cells, the phagocyte and the lymphocyte, looking at their nucleus. But for a red blood cell or erythrocytes, red blood cells are also called erythrocytes. These cells do not have the nucleus. Why? They frequently ask that question. They will say, why is it, or what is the importance of the absence of the nucleus in red blood cells? That's how they ask that question. Okay, so the importance of the absence of the nucleus in a red blood cell is that it's in fact just from its function. Red blood cells, their main function is to distribute oxygen or to carry oxygen. Okay, so the absence of the nucleus enables it or makes it easy for the adaptation of oxygen in the lungs. The absence of the nucleus rather increases the total surface area for the adaptation of oxygen in the lungs. Okay, so that is one common thing I love about red blood cells. They do not have the nucleus. How? So that there should be an increase in the surface area for the adaptation of oxygen and hemoglobin in the lungs. Mind you, as we learned in the previous lesson, when blood is coming from the lungs, it is oxygenated blood. Okay, we can call it oxygenated blood, but I prefer calling it oxyhemoglobin. Okay, because it is a combination of oxygen and hemoglobin. The red pigment you see in blood, that is hemoglobin. Okay, so it is now called oxyhemoglobin. Okay, because it is having oxygen and it's having hemoglobin. Okay, so answering the first question, we are going to say that is a phagocyte. Okay, they're saying identify the cell labeled F in figure 1.1. That is a phagocyte. Then numero 2, they're saying which feature in the diagram enables you to identify cell F in A numero 1 above. Why am I saying that cell F is a phagocyte? I've explained that it's because of the lobed nucleus. Okay, because the difference in those two cells, the phagocyte and the lymphocyte, is just the structure of the nucleus. Okay, a phagocyte has a lobed nucleus, then a lymphocyte has a large nucleus, which makes it easy for it to produce antibodies and antitoxins. Then question B, number 1, that's saying figure 1.1 shows a group of similar cells. What term is used to refer to such a group of cells? Okay, so if we can go back to the question or the diagram, figure 1.1, I said that cell or cell E, that is, or those are ciliated cells. Okay, that's ciliated cells. Now we're saying that is, or in short, that is a group of cells. That diagram shows a group of these cells known as cell E, or the ciliated cells. Okay, so a group of cells, always forms what we call a tissue. Okay, a group of cells always forms what we call a tissue. Then specialized tissue will form what we call an organ. So we have cells, then from cells, if we have specialized cells, there will be known now as a tissue. Like look at blood. Blood is a tissue. Why is it a tissue? Because it has cells in it, specialized cells. So a group of cells is forming a tissue. Then a group of specialized tissue will form what we are calling an organ. Like an organ, I can talk of the most interesting organ I always refer to is the heart. Okay, the heart is an organ, the brain is an organ, the liver is an organ, the kidney is an organ. Okay, so all those organs we're having in our body, they comprise of tissue, and these tissue are having what? Cells. Okay, so we're saying that a group of cells will form a tissue, a group of tissue will form an organ, then groups of different body organs will form what we are calling a system. Okay, like for example, we have the digestive system. In the digestive system, which organ do we have there? The stomach. Okay, in the nervous system, which organ do we have there? The brain. Okay, in the excretory system or under excretion, which organ do we have there? We have the kidney. You get? So in each system there should be organs involved, because groups of different organs will form a system. We have different system: endocrine system, nervous system, respiratory system. Okay, in the respiratory system, the organ that we have there is the lungs. Okay, so that is how it is. Then these different systems in your body will form now an organism, which is you, a human being. Okay, so that's how it goes. It is from cells, tissue, organ, system, then organism. Okay, so that is the way it is. Now, looking at the second question, or question B number 1, is saying figure 1.1 shows a group of similar cells. Since they are similar, they are specialized. Now they're saying what term is used to refer to such a group of cells. So that is a tissue. Okay, that is a tissue. And take note, that is not written tissue. That was a typing error. Okay, that should be for the second question. Okay, that was just a typing error. So it is a tissue. As I've explained, a group of cells will form a tissue, then tissue, organ, system, organism. So it should be tissue there. Then B numero 2, that's saying suggest a region in the human body where figure 1.1 is found. So figure 1.1, we have said these are ciliated cells. Okay, or cell E, that is a ciliated cell. Now, for us to know where they are found, we should first understand the function of ciliated cells. So ciliated cells specifically, they are found in what we call the inner lining of the respiratory tract. Okay, the inner lining of the respiratory tract, like in your nostrils. Okay, we have ciliated cells there. So it is not only in the respiratory tract. The word respiratory deals with the breathing system. Okay, the breathing system. Once you hear the word respiratory, it is different from circulatory. Circulatory shows the movement of blood, but respiratory shows the breathing system. Okay, so in the respiratory tract, that is where we're having these ciliated cells. Apart from in the respiratory tract, we also have these ciliated cells in the fallopian tube, or also known as the oviduct. So now someone might be asking a question to say, why should we have ciliated cells in the fallopian tube? At least in the respiratory tract, we understand, because the ciliated cells, they have what we call cilia on top, which flicks. To flick means to move. So for the ciliated cells there in the respiratory tract, what they do there, they will just trap dust particles. Okay, they trap dust particles. If you've been in a dusty room, you'll find that your nostrils will have a lot of dust, because that dust has been trapped by these ciliated cells. Now, why did God decide to put these ciliated cells in the fallopian tube? If we can talk a bit of reproduction for us to understand why the ciliated cells are. If we talk of reproduction, just the basis of reproduction, you'll find that a human being, a normal human being, a normal adult should produce about 2 million sperm cells. Okay, so as these cells are produced, the number keeps on reducing. Okay, because only one cell has the capability of fertilizing an ovum. Okay, now how does the number reduce? That's a question you should ask yourself. How does the number reduce from 2 million, then only one is surviving? Yeah, I love saying the term survive because they don't actually reach there. Okay, so they should be one, only one should survive. And in some instances, all of them will just die on their way. Okay, no wonder you find that there's sexual intercourse, but a woman is not pregnant, which means all the cells they didn't reach the ovum. Okay, and that is due to low sperm count. Okay, so as a man produces 2 million sperm cells, as they just arrive in the vagina is very, very acidic. Okay, so as they reach there, some cells, some weak sperm cells, they will just die there. Okay, so the number reduces from 2 million to a certain number. Okay, that's how the number reduces. Okay, their vagina is acidic, and that acidity kills some sperm cells as they are swimming. And as they now move towards the fallopian tube, in the fallopian tube, we've said that this is why we're having these ciliated cells. And these ciliated cells, they have what we call cilia. So in this cilia, as the cilia flicks, the cells, so some of these sperm cells are trapped in the cilia. Okay, and they fail to swim, reaching up to the ovum. They are trapped. Okay, and again their number is reduced. Okay, the number is reduced. Then finally, as these sperm cells, maybe let's take for instance, out of the 2 million, maybe we're only remaining with 1,000 sperm cells are the ones which you have managed to swim up to the ovum. Now, we've understood the fact that only one sperm cell will fertilize the ovum. So the ovum, the way it is, it has about 2 layers. The first layer is known as the corona radiata. Okay, the first layer of an ovum is known as the corona radiata. Okay, so yeah, some cells will try to also penetrate through this layer, but there is another layer which is the most interesting layer, which is the zona pellucida. This is the other or the next layer just after the corona radiata. So that is now the zona pellucida. So what the zona pellucida does, immediately one sperm cell penetrates through this layer, the same layer releases an acidic chemical known as the blastocyst. Okay, and this chemical now kills the rest of the cells which are outside, which have not yet penetrated through this layer. Okay, that mechanism prevents other sperm cells from entering or passing through the zona pellucida. So this is how the number is reduced from 2 million up to just one single cell. Okay, so that is just the basis of reproduction. Okay, I wanted to give a clear picture why we should have ciliated cells in the fallopian tube. So the trying or this is where these sperm cells are trapped, or in other forms, these ciliated cells, since they flick, they help in the movement of the ovum into the uterus. Okay, that is another reason. So that's the reason why we have these ciliated cells in the fallopian tube. Okay, so but there in my answers I've only picked one because I suggest a region. Okay, we're English students, so when they say a region specifically, that is one, unless if they said regions. Okay, so a region in the human body where figure 1.1 is found, I have said the lining or the inner lining of the respiratory tract. Otherwise, you can also say in the fallopian tube or the oviduct. Then let's go to question B numero 3. That's saying give one function of the part labeled G in figure 1.1. Let's go back to the diagram and see this part labeled G. So the part labeled G is here. So this part, this is where we're having the same cilia I was talking of. That is the cilia, okay? C-I-L-I-A, cilia, okay? So this part labeled G is the cilia, okay? Now, the question is saying give one function of the same cilia or the part labeled G. So we've said the function, if it is in the respiratory tract, they are trying to trap dust particles. If it is in the fallopian tube, they are helping the movement of the ovum into the uterus. As simple as that. So you can just pick any. If you're talking about in the respiratory tract, they're trying to trap dust particles. Then in the fallopian tube, they're trying to help the movement of the ovum into the uterus, okay? So this is the answer I've picked, okay? From the two, we're saying to trap dust particles and germs, like in the nostrils, we'll find these cilia. Okay, then question C. Question C is saying, state two specialized cells in plants. In my preamble, I said those two cells were having animal cells, okay? The ciliated and the phagocyte, because they're found in humans or animals specifically. Yeah, in biology were considered to be specialized animals. Yeah. So, but here now the question is saying we state two specialized cells in plants. Okay. So in plants we have the guard cells. Okay. So these guard cells are found in the leaves. Okay. What do? The guard cells, they control the opening and closing of the stomata. Okay, that is one of the specialized cells found in plants. The other one is the root hair cell. Okay, so the root hair cells, these now they're found on the tips of the roots. Okay, and what do? They help in the transportation or the absorption of water and mineral salts. Okay, that is it. Okay, so now here they just said state two specialized cells in plants. So I've just picked out guard cells and root hair cells, but there are a lot. We have palisade cells, we have xylem cells. Okay, you can name any of those so long as they are plant cells. Okay, then question C numero 2 is saying for one named specialized cell in C numero 1 above, explain its function. For one named, we've named two cells in the first question. Okay, question C numero 1, okay, which is the first question of C. So we've named two, guard cells and root hair cells, but they're saying for one named, any of them, you can just state the function of guard cells or for root hair cells. Okay, so long as that cell, you have tried to state it in the first question of C. Okay, so here I picked the root hair cell and I've explained the function. So here I said absorption of water and mineral salts. Okay, then specifically in brackets I'm saying root hair cell because it is the cell I've picked. So I've tried to even say this function is for root hair cells. Sometimes you get the question wrongly, not because you don't know, because you have not answered it correctly. How can you just say absorption of water and mineral salts? You end there. How am I going to? I'm expecting you to tell me which cell has that function. Okay, so no wonder in brackets I've said root hair cells. Okay, so for those who requested for the first question to be answered, these were the answers which were expected. Let's go to the other question which was also requested, which is the last question. Okay, so that is question 4 from the same past paper, which is 2018. Internal, mind you, that is an internal paper, not GCE paper, internal paper. Okay, and this is question 4 of paper 2. So now the question is saying figure 4.1 shows muscles and bones of the forelimb of a human being. This question has ever come, or a topic where this question is drawn from has ever come. This topic is locomotion, a grade 11 topic. This is locomotion. Okay. Now, you know that there's one funny thing I always really laugh about, always when I'm teaching locomotion. Was said when we're born with 300 bones. Okay? When the time you were born, as below the age of 6, along that period, you had 300 bones. But at that point where you are as an adult, for you to be in grade 12 or for you to sit for GC exams, I'm sure you should be above 15, 16 years, somewhere there. Okay, so as you are there, you are having about 206 bones. How is it so? You are born with 300 bones, but as you grow, as you reach adulthood, you are left with 206 bones. Where are the other bones? Where do they go? That is a funny question. That is a question that you should be asking always. Okay? But nevertheless, the answer is very simple. The answer is very simple. There's a process in biology we call mitochondrial ossification. Okay? Mitochondrial ossification. That is the process that happens, or that is where the reduction of bones comes from 300 up to 206. Okay, now what is this mitochondrial? What does it do? How do these bones reduce? Okay, if you've observed actions of babies, you'll find that a baby would sit in an awkward position for a long period of time, but they won't even be affected. They won't feel any pain. Why? Because babies are made up of cartilage, or the bones that are not yet fully, they've not reached full maturity. They are what we call cartilage. Okay, so these different cartilages, they fuse in together to form strong bones. Okay, so that is why we have a reduction. Or I think you've observed this if you've seen a baby, you find that just on top of the head there's just that pump which comes out when the just maybe some months, some kind of that. So I'm sure you've observed that. So where does that pump comes from? Where is the beat coming from? Okay, that is one of the strongest bones in your body, known as the skull. Okay, skull. Okay, the skull. This is the strongest bone in your body, and it protects your brain. Okay, so as a baby it is divided into half. Okay, so there's some kind of space in between those two bones. Okay, in the middle of the skull, there's some space. So that is where that beat comes from. Okay, but as they grow, those two bones, or that cartilage, I'm saying bones so that you understand, but that is cartilage, or soft bones in short. Okay, so those two different cartilage, which is soft bones, they'll fuse in together to form a strong bone known as the skull. And you can bear with me that you no longer have that bit on top of your head, because your skull now has fully developed. You don't have any division in between the skull. Okay, so that is what it is, or that is what mitochondrial ossification is. So even some other bones we can talk of in the body, if the cartilage, they'll fuse in together to form a strong bone. So that is why we have that reduction in the number of bones from 300 up to 206. Okay, that is it. I hope we understand. Okay, so now we have 206 bones as adults. So these bones, at least if you want to pass biology, at least know the half of those 206 bones. Okay, because under locomotion, you don't know which bone they'll ask you of. Like just in the diagram you're seeing there, they're saying that is a forelimb, or the arm. Okay, that's an arm. We're having a forelimb, that is an arm. So there are about about 4 bones there. Just in the arm, we have 4 bones. Okay, so when I say half of the 206 bones, it does not mean those other crucial muscles. I mean, bones you cannot even remember. No, just these bones which are commonly brought, like the bones in the leg, the bones in the arm, the bones in the ear, the most interesting bones I talk of always. Okay, so at least if you know those bones and other bones, the hip bones, the bones of the spine, okay, or the spine vertebrae, you know those bones, okay, then my friend, you are good to go with biology. Okay, so now specifically in this lesson we'll just look at these bones. Okay, you can see that it is very vital to understand the diagram that we're having. Okay, so like for example, if you look at this part which is labeled S, this part which is labeled S is the bone that just branches in your chest. Okay, this bone here, from your shoulder here into your chest, this bone is known as the scapula. Okay, that is the scapula. Then here we have one bone which is here. It is not labeled, take note, it is not labeled. This T, it is trying to point out the muscle which is here. Then Ara is also pointing out the muscle. Then in between these two muscles, we have a bone, a very long bone which is here. Then after there, we have 2 bones here, which is this down bone which is labeled U, and this top bone which is not labeled. Okay, now one thing that you need to know is that where you have muscles, you always have one bone there. Okay, like here, check, we have 2 muscles here, muscle Ara and muscle T. We'll find out in a bit the name given to these muscles. So we have muscle Ara and muscle T, but we only have one bone. But here, we don't have any muscle. We don't have any muscle. No wonder we're having 2 bones. So like from your elbow here up to your hand, you're having 2 bones. Then from your elbow up to your shoulder, you're having 1 bone. Why? Because from your elbow to your shoulder, you have muscles, 2 muscles. And these muscles, they're so interesting. Okay, we'll learn that in a bit. Okay, so I've said that this bone which branches into the chest, that is known as the scapula. Then this bone which is between these 2 muscles, this bone is known as the humerus. Okay, the humerus. Okay, that is Humerus, humerus. Okay, this is the humerus. Then we have these 2 bones, bone U, which has been labeled, that is the ulna, which is ULNA, the ulna. Then we have this other bone, the top bone here. This is the radius. Okay, this is the radius, and I guess those people were naming these bones, they just had to look at it as being shorter than the ulna, and they named it radius. Because if you go in mathematics, radius is half of the circumference. I mean the diameter, sorry, okay? The radius is half of the diameter. So since it being half or shorter than the diameter, I think that's the reason why this bone was named the radius, because it is shorter than the ulna, I guess. So just trying to assume. Okay, now I think we've understood all. I've not talked of the muscles. So these muscles, muscle T is known as the tricep muscle. Okay, the tricep muscle, I'll explain what it does. Then muscle Ara is known as the bicep muscle, the one which is found inside here where you make your 90 degrees. If you extend your arm like that, if you extend it, you'll find that you have a flat surface or a 180 degree. But if you bend it towards your face somewhere there, it will reach a point where it is making that 90 degrees. So we call that part the inside part. So that inside part, that is why we have the bicep. That is how you can remember these 2 muscles. Okay, the one which is found outside or the back of your arm, that is the tricep. Okay, and this person who prepared this question was very lenient, I guess, because he labeled or she labeled this bone as S, and it is actually called the scapula. It's like giving you a clue. And this muscle T, that is the tricep, again giving you a clue, trying to label it T. Then this bone here, it is the ulna, and giving it the label U, which is also trying to trigger an idea, okay? But only except for this muscle, which is muscle R. This is the bicep muscle. So let's hope next time this person will think of trying to also label this one as B, so that it becomes bicep. Yeah. So let's go now to the question and see what they've asked. Okay, so question A, numero 1 and 2. Okay, so question A, numero 1 is saying, we identify muscle T. So muscle T, that is the tricep muscle. Okay, that is the tricep muscle, the one which is found at the back of your arm. Okay, that is the tricep muscle. Then numero 2, they're saying we identify bone U. Bone U, that is the ulna. Okay, let's just put the answers there. Okay, so it is the tricep. Okay, so muscle T is the tricep. That is how we spell it. Then bone U, that is the ulna. Okay, that is the ulna, that's the bone. Then the other bone is the radius. Okay, now question B, number 1, they're saying, what name is given to the pair of muscles T and R? Okay, so we have this pair of muscles which is T and R. So they have a common name. Okay, now let's talk of something. Let's talk of the heart. Okay, so the heart has a very special muscle. Okay, we call it a special muscle because it is myogenic. When we say it is myogenic, we mean that it is self-stimulating. When we say it is self-stimulating, we mean the contraction and relaxation comes from the muscle itself. Okay, when this muscle, the muscle of the heart, when it contracts, blood comes in. When it relaxes, blood goes out. Okay, so it is contracting and relaxing on its own. No wonder we call it a special muscle, or it is myogenic, or it is self-stimulating. Okay, so it is called a special muscle. But the actual name of this muscle is the cardiac muscle, the muscle of the heart. It is a cardiac muscle. Why have I picked that muscle in relation to our question? They're saying we state a name given to such a pair of these two muscles, the tricep and the bicep. Okay, so I've picked the muscle of the heart because that is the muscle which is pointing out a difference between this pair and that muscle. So I've said that it is called a special muscle because it is myogenic, and we are saying it is, when we say it is myogenic, we mean that it is self-stimulating. Being self-stimulating, it means contraction and relaxation comes from the muscle itself. But let's look at these two muscles. So when you extend your hand, like you forward your hand, to extend means to forward your hand. Let me not say your hand, your arm. Okay, because it's the whole part. Okay, so when you extend, what is happening there is the tricep muscle is contracting, then the bicep muscle is relaxing. Okay, but immediately you bring forth, or you bring forward, you bring your hand towards your face. That process now is the opposite of what I've said. Now what is happening? The bicep muscle is contracting, then the tricep muscle is relaxing. You even find that it forms a hip. Okay, like for those who go to gym, you can bear with me. It forms like a hip here. Okay, it becomes swollen, like it's swollen because it is contracting. Okay, that is how these muscles work. So these muscles, or this pair of muscles, that are trying to oppose each other. When this one contracts, this one should relax. When this one contracts, the other one should relax. Okay, they're opposing each other, so they are not special muscles. They cannot be referred to like how the cardiac muscle is. the cardiac muscle, the contraction and relaxation is coming from the muscle itself. There's only one muscle there. There's no any opposing muscle. Okay, so no wonder he picked out that muscle as an example to give a distinct between this pair and that muscle. Okay, so these muscles are opposing each other. These are the same muscles which we even have in the leg, but they're just called another name. Like for the tricep will be called the flexor muscle. Okay, but in other books they will still write it as the tricep. Okay, the in front here, like if you look at the point from your knee up to your hip in front, that muscle is known as the tricep muscle or the flexor muscle. Then the bicep muscle in the leg is called the extensor. Okay, so that is the distinct there. Okay, so these muscles, these two muscles, they oppose to each other. If muscles are opposing to each other, they are not called special muscles. What are they called? They are called antagonistic muscles. Okay, so that qualifies to be the answer for question B, number 1. They said, what name is given to the pair of muscles T and R? So T and R, since these two muscles, they oppose each other, they are called antagonistic muscles. There are a lot of antagonistic pair of muscles that we have in our body, which we'll look at as we go forward. But question B, number 2, is asking us to name such other type of muscles or other antagonistic muscles we have in the body. Okay, it reads, question B, number 2, name one other such pair of muscles in the body which is antagonistic muscles. So like the very good example I can give you is the bone or the muscles of the eye. In the eye, we have these two muscles which oppose to each other during the process of the pupil iris reflex. Okay, there's a concept called the pupil iris reflex, which controls the amount of light entering in your eye. You'll find that at some point, if you're in a very, very bright place, like outside, like for instance, it's around 15 hours. You can imagine how sunny or how bright it is outside. Then you're standing there. Then there's this room which is not having any windows. I guess you can imagine how dark it is. So immediately you move from outside into that room, you have that difficulty in seeing. Okay, until after some minutes, that's when you'll see clearly. Because of this reason, the pupil iris reflex ensures that adequate amount of light is entering through the eye. Okay, how? The two muscles of the eye, which is the circular muscle and the radial muscle, they oppose each other. So when you're aware it is bright, like outside around 15, somewhere there, you'll find that what is happening there, there's a lot of brightness. So your eye should try to limit some amount of light trying to enter in your eye. How is it going to do so? So the circular muscles, the round muscles that are round, I guess we'll do that. I'll practically also teach that when we start looking at the eye so that you see. I'll give reference to this question again. Okay, so the circular muscles who contract, the pupil is just in the center. Okay, the pupil is in the center. Then the muscles surrounding the pupil are the circular muscles. Then there are muscles which cut opposite the circular muscles. Those are radial muscles. So the circular muscles will contract during bright light. They will contract while the radial muscles will relax. So why are they contracting? So that they make the pupil narrow. Okay, the pupil becomes narrow during bright light so that it limits the amount of light passing through your eye. Okay, so in bright light, the circular muscles will contract while the radial muscles will relax. But if you now move from that place where there's bright light, you enter in a room which has dim light, which means now what is happening there? For you to see, you need much light, or you need high intensity of light. But what was happening outside, your circular muscles were contracting, which means the pupil has become narrow. No wonder you will first find it difficult for you to see in a dim light, in a dim lighted room. Once you're from a bright place, okay, you'll find it difficult because outside there, the circular muscles were contracting, or specifically the pupil had become narrow. So when you enter in a dim lighted room, it should take now some time. Your brain should send a stimuli to say, to the muscles, the two muscles, to say, no, the circular muscle now should relax. As it is relaxing, the pupil becomes wide so that much light intensity can be accommodated. Okay, so I think you understand that when we look at the eye, one of the sense organs which we learn in biology. Okay, so that is the example, or that is another pair of antagonistic muscles. You can see that they're opposing to each other. When this one contracts, the other one relaxes. Okay, then another such type of muscles or antagonistic muscles, the muscles in your leg, the flexor and the extensor muscles. As you are walking, they're busy relaxing and contracting. That is also another good example of antagonistic muscles. Not only that pair, we also have the muscles of the esophagus or the gut, okay, in the digestive system. So as the bolus moves, you get your piece of meat, you masticate, you swallow, it forms it will be formed into a bolus. So as it moves through the esophagus, the reason why it is moving, because the two muscles are opposing each other. There we have the longitudinal muscles and the circular muscles. Okay, so the inner muscles are called circular muscles. The outside muscles of the esophagus are longitudinal muscles. So before the bolus, the circular muscle will contract so that the bolus is pushed into the direction of the stomach. So that is also another such pair of antagonistic muscles. The muscles of the esophagus, which is the circular muscle, and the longitudinal muscle. And take note, in most cases, pupils misquote these pairs. In the esophagus, we have circular and longitudinal. Then in the eye, we have circular and radial. That's a difference. They both have circular. Okay, so in the esophagus, we're having circular and longitudinal muscle. The inner muscle, that is circular. Outside muscle, longitudinal. Then in the eye, we're having circular muscles as the round muscles of the iris. Then the opposite cut muscles, those are radial muscles. Okay, so we can get any, because they said name one other such pair. Okay, so among those I've tried to note out, you can pick any. But in the sake of answering this question, I picked the circular and radial muscles, and we only have a mark there. And I've seen some questions where a student will just say circular muscle or radial muscle or longitudinal muscle. No, that's saying a pair. A pair should not be alone. If you just say circular muscle, is that a pair? It isn't. Okay, so if we're talking of a pair, there should be two things involved there. Okay, so circular and radial muscle, circular and longitudinal muscle, flexor and extensor muscle, tricep and bicep muscle. So all those are antagonistic muscles. Then the only muscle which is a very special muscle is the cardiac muscle. Okay, but in the urinary system we have the sphincter muscle. Okay, but let me not talk of that now. Okay, then question C. Question C is saying label on figure 4.0 where you find for numero 1, a tendon. Then numero 2, a pivot joint. So that's saying we label on the same diagram that they've given us. We label where we find a tendon and where we find a pivot. We cannot label where a tendon is minus knowing what a tendon is. Okay, so we have what we call a ligament and a tendon. Okay, so these two are different from each other. Why have I specifically picked a ligament? Because I've observed in some cases students try to misquote the function of a ligament to a function of a tendon. Okay, so a ligament a ligament, this is a part that connects a bone to another bone on a joint. Okay, so bones, if we're having two different bones on the opposite side, the between part there, or the intersection part, will have what we're going to call a ligament first. So a ligament is connecting a bone to a bone. Now, what is its main function? It prevents dislocation. Okay, why these two bones should be connected together indirectly? I'm saying indirectly because there's something that is connecting them. They're not connected to each other directly. They're indirectly connected to each other. So there should be that part which should be connecting these two bones so that we shouldn't experience dislocation. Okay, so a tendon prevents dislocation. It is a part that connects a bone to another bone on a joint. Okay, that is how it is, or that is what a ligament is. Now, what about a tendon? So a tendon is a part, okay, is a part that connects a bone to a muscle. Okay, a tendon will now connect a bone to a muscle. What's the specific function of a tendon? A tendon converts contraction into movement. You can be able to move your hand back and forth because the ligament is converting that contraction of a muscle. We've said that a muscle will contract and relax. So now here we're saying that contraction will be converted into movement. No wonder a tendon will be connected to a bone, from a bone to a muscle. And that contraction is coming from a muscle. So when a muscle contracts, a tendon will convert that contraction into movement. Okay, so that this is the difference. And in most cases, I've given this question to students. They misquote the functions of a ligament to that function of a tendon. So I said a ligament connects a bone to a bone. Then its main function, it prevents dislocation, while a tendon connects a bone to a muscle. Its main function, it converts contraction into movement. As you are walking, that is biology, okay, which means you should be able to understand, okay, the way I'm walking, which means the contraction of the flex or muscle is being converted into movement by a tendon. No wonder I'm able to move. Okay, that is how we understand biology. Now, since we now know what a tendon is, we should label on the diagram. There's a label on figure 1.1 where you find a tendon. So let's go back to the diagram. Okay, so this is the diagram. So a tendon will always be the smaller part at the end of a muscle. So like this part here, you can set this is a bone and this is a muscle. So here there's the connection of a muscle and a bone. So here where they're being connected to each other, this is where we have a tendon. Not only here, you can even see that even here, this muscle, the bicep muscle, is being connected to the radius, which is a bone. Okay, so there's a connection between a muscle and a bone. So even here we have a tendon. So we can either label it from here or from here. It is always the smallest part of a muscle. In some other texts, you see that definition. They say it is a smallest part of a muscle, that is a tendon. So where you see it slimming away, where it is becoming narrow, that is where we have a tendon. Okay, so you can label it from there. In my video, I've not labeled. Okay, so you can label it here or here. It's up to you. Okay, then let's look at the next question. That's saying, okay, we also label on the same figure 4.0 where we find now a pivot joint. Mind you, we have three types of joints. Okay, we have three types of joints. Okay, and being precise, a joint is a point where two bones meet. That's a joint. A joint is a point where two bones meet. Now I'm saying we have three types of joints. The first type of joints, they're called fibrous joints. Okay, they're called fibrous joints, and these joints are said to be immovable joints. They don't move. Okay, like the joints of your skull. Okay, the bone that protects your brain, the one which I talked of earlier. Okay, so those joints that are found in the skull, they're immovable. They don't move. No wonder you can shake your head as much as possible, you won't hear any movement of bones there, but they are joints. Okay, your skull has joints, but since the type of joints which are there, the fibrous joints, which means that immovable joints, they don't move. Okay, that is the first type of joint that we have. Joints, I mean. Then the other type of joints that we have is cartilaginous joints. Okay, so these cartilaginous joints, they're said to be slightly movable joints. They move slightly, not completely, but they just move slightly. Okay, very good example of cartilaginous joints is the joints of the spinal vertebrae or the spinal cord. Okay, you can say that if you bend, as you bend, you will find that the spine will only move slightly. Then the part which will start moving now completely is your waist. Okay, so those joints, they only slightly move, they don't completely move. No wonder we consider them to be slightly movable joints, cartilaginous joints. Then the last type of joints, which is my favorite, we call them synovial joints. Okay, so these joints are said to be movable. Okay, synovial joints are said to be movable, and these joints again that categorized into synovial joints are categorized into. We have what we call the hinge joint, hinge, hinge joint. Okay, so these hinge joint, they are found on the shoulder and on the elbow. Okay, so the type of joint that is on the shoulder and on the elbow here, that is a hinge joint, because these joints, they only allow movement up to 180 degrees. Okay, if you stretch your hand like this, it will just go up to straight, which means that is 180. It cannot go through, which means you break your hand in that way. Okay, so it allows movement up to 180 degrees, the hinge joint. It is a category of synovial joints. Yeah, I don't know how you would pronounce it, but I call it synovial. So some people call it the synovial joint. Okay, synovial, synovial, whatsoever. It depends on the type of breakfast that you have. So that is how, yeah. But the other type of synovial joint is, or the other category is, the ball and socket joint. Okay, the ball and socket joint. Now, this joint is now found or where we can categorize, or where we can specifically look at it. And take note, take note. The ball and the hinge joint can be found at the elbow joint, even at the knee joint. Okay, knee joint. You can stretch your leg, it will just make up to 180. You can bend it 90 degrees. It cannot exceed 180. Okay, but for ball and socket joint, we only find them at the hip joint. No wonder you are able to dance, because it can move up to 360 degrees. You can move your waist like that, because that joint can move up to a complete revolution, which is 360. Okay, and take note, the shoulder joint, sometimes it is also said to be a ball and socket, because you can move your hand round like this and bring it back. Yeah, that's something like that. Okay, so specifically, two regions or two parts where we find the hinge joint, the elbow joint and the knee joint. Then for the ball and socket, shoulder and hip joints. Okay, so that is where these joints are found. Now, the pivot joint is a hinge joint. Okay, so no wonder before I answered the question, I wanted to give an explanation on these joints. So a pivot joint is a hinge joint. So here, where we're going to label it is just here on the elbow, because this is where we have the hinge joint. I've said the hinge joint is found on the knee joint and on the elbow joint, where you can make 90 or up to 180. Okay, so here at the elbow, this is where we label our pivot joint. Then the tendon here or there. Okay, that is it. Let's proceed to the other question. Okay, all right, so we have answered question C, number 1 and number 2. Let's go to question D. So question D is saying, give 2 ways in which skeletal muscles of an insect differ from skeletal muscle of a human being. Okay, so the difference is very simple. As humans, our skeleton is hidden by our skin. Okay, so which means our skeleton is inside, or it is the type of skeleton that we have is endoskeleton. Okay, because the word endo means inside, so our skeleton is inside. Okay, if I look at you, I won't be able to see your skeleton. I will only be able to see your skin, because your skin covers your skeleton. Okay, so in humans, or the difference is that in humans it is endoskeleton. Okay, it is endoskeleton. Then in insect is exo. Let's look at the very good example of an insect. Which one should we? Okay, a very good example is a grasshopper. Okay, if you have looked at how a grasshopper looks like, you will be able to agree to me to say yes, the skeleton of a grasshopper is exo, it is outside. Okay, it is outside, it is exo. Okay, so that is the first difference. They want 2 differences, so we can write that. So we're saying the skeletal muscle in humans are endo, while in insects are exo. Okay, as simple as that. You have your mark. Then the other difference is that muscles of insects do not contain tendons, and I guess I've explained what a tendon is. Okay, so muscles of insects do not contain tendons, while muscles of human beings contains tendons. Like in the question that we have, with the diagram that we have, that arm is of a human being. No wonder we're able to label where we find a tendon. Okay, because human beings, the skeleton of the human beings has tendons, which connects bones to muscles, and they convert their contraction into movement. Okay, then the last question, I've even already answered this question. That's saying, identify the bone labeled S. Identify the bone labeled S. Let's go back to the diagram. So, that is okay. So bone S, I said this is the scapula, the one which branches into your chest. That is the scapula. And we have our 12 marks for question 4. So this is how we were supposed to answer these questions, question 1 and 4 of 2018. Biology is a very, very simple subject, so long as we are studying, because it tries to talk of the things that we can even give practical examples to. Okay, you breathing, that is biology. You seeing what is there on the screen, it is biology. Okay, So it is not a very difficult subject so long as we can revise. And as we are right now, it is not necessary just going through books every day, going through books. No, it is high time you started answering questions from past papers, because these are the questions which they will bring and just try to change the context of the question. Look at the question that I'm from solving. This is a 2018 question paper. Look at 2020. Okay, it is a similar question. It's just that they're using a different diagram and a different way of asking questions. But if you have understood how I've answered these questions, you'll be even able to answer questions from that other paper, which is a 2020 biology question paper. So thank you very much. For those others who are still having requests on other questions from different past papers, you can still drop a comment in the commentary box. Okay, thank you very much.